Let's Chat About It is a thought-provoking podcast where your hosts Lenora and Max Brown engage in meaningful conversations with everyday individuals about the pivotal moments when they realized they were different. Tune in every Friday for fresh, inspiring videos that delve into personal narratives exploring the diverse journeys of self-discovery. From childhood revelations to adulthood epiphanies, each episode is a celebration of the diverse paths that shape our identities. This is more than just a podcast. It's a platform inviting you to connect with others through storytelling.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Lenora. I'm with Max Brown. This is the podcast called Let's Chat About It. Today we have Sarah Meyer on deck, and so excited to bring her to you all. She's going to share her story, and as usual, Max and I don't know what she's going to say, so super excited to bring her in. Max, what is the question of the week here?
Well, so is the holiday, the like Christmas holiday, New Year's, all that starts to wind down. Do you have a tradition? Or the other thing I was thinking about is I might or might not have been imbibing on a little bit too much sugar, like a holiday treat that you are every year looking forward to.
Oh, that's a good question, Max.
I can't tell if you're being honest. I was kind of like, that's a good
question.
No,
I don't really have one.
Do your family have do you have a tradition that you like, a specific meal you eat on a certain time of the year, or a specific gift
the
or
only
anything you
one,
share?
like around this time that we do is gumbo, and I just made some last night or yesterday, and it was really good. And I'd never made it for my family before. I usually just make it for, I never made it for my like my dad and my sister and all. But I usually make it for my family, right?
Gotcha.
My husband
extended
and
family, no. Yeah, the immediate versus the extended.
Yeah, so I was a little worried because I'm not known as the cook in the so they usually like, Lenora, just bring a salad, bring an appetizer,
bring a loaf of bread. It'd be great.
I'm actually a pretty good cook, but I like to let them know that I always wanted to think that. So I'm like, oh, that's fine. But I did make gumbo yesterday.
So now you intentionally don't make good food just so you have the easy thing to bring for the holiday.
I make it, but I don't volunteer, like, because my sister's just known for making certain things, and so I'm just like, that's fine. She can carry that torch all day long. So I made gumbo, and it was delicious, and people went back for seconds, and so I knew it was good. So that's something that we always have around the holidays. How about you?
I would say, like, we do, our big one is we make monkey bread on Christmas Day, and but it's gone through a lot of iterations. Like, it's the only time of year we ever make it. We don't make it for any other reason, and so every year we're like, something was off, but we never write it down. We never think about it. And so we try. We're like, I think it was this, and so we sort of adjust. I mean, it's like it's processed canned croissant rolls. They're cut like crescent rolls that are cut up with like cinnamon, sugar, and butter. Like, how can you screw this up? And trust us,
but you do it.
It's still good. It's just you look back and you're like, I probably would have done that a little differently. Okay, then I will ask this question: is there a tradition that you have in terms of like, we like, obviously we try to get in some Christmas movies. We try to do like a Christmas light drive night thing, and then the other one that we do is Thanksgiving night. We let the kids they get to open one gift, which is this Christmas jammies. So like that's our thing. But is there anything in the
watch
household?
Arthur Christmas. We watch every Christmas Eve, and then we have crab and this year we had crab and prime rib and potatoes and all that kind of stuff. But we always have crab on Christmas Eve, and we always watch Arthur Christmas, which is a cute little movie.
Is it like Arthur the cartoon thing, or is this
something? It's a cartoon. It's funny though. It's like, but I can't explain it. But
is it Arthur like the TV show, or is it a different Arthur?
I don't know if it's a show, but it's the movie that we watch is Arthur. He's like a character plus, and he's in line. Him and his brother are gonna kind of compete for it because Santa Claus is ready to retire, and so Arthur really wants it, and his brother really wants it, but Arthur has a heart, and he's an empath. So we watch that and have crab, and we open our PJs, we open our pajamas.
Your Christmas Eve PJ people.
Yep, that's it.
Very cool. Very
All right,
cool.
so today we have Sarah Meyer.
Ah.
So excited, and you know her too. So this isn't
Yes.
like
This
this
isn't
isn't
the
a
first
cold
time.
no. Yeah, and so I've worked with Sarah before and continue to kind of work with her, even though we work for different agencies and um, traveled with her, and she's just fun. I'm so excited to
Good
have you all
people.
meet her. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's good people, and I can't wait to hear her story. So, all right, so welcome to the show, Sarah. So good to see you again. Usually we start off by just having the guests introduce themselves. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I'm happy to. So my name's Sarah, and my last name is actually hyphenated. So Sarah Connelly-Meyer. So I use it kind of interchangeably, but I live in Olympia, Washington. I've been here in the Pacific Northwest for about 13 years, originally from California. I love the rain. So people often are like, oh my gosh, why'd you move to the Northwest? And don't you miss the sun? And I do not. So uh, yeah, I currently do a couple different things for work. I work at the Washington State Department of Health doing employee engagement and inclusion work, which I really enjoy. And I also teach at Evergreen State College. And then I have a little small coaching practice on the side that I try to maintain. And then a large variety of outdoor pursuits and activities. My most current obsession is whitewater rafting. So
That's so cool.
I've got 2 giant dogs also that take up a ton of my time, and 2 kiddos that are grown.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. So one of the first questions that we usually ask is, tell us the story about when you first realized you were different.
Yeah, you sent me the question. I've seen the podcast, and I just love the mix of the 2 of you and your guests so far. And I was reflecting, like, gosh, I don't know if there's anything different about me. However, I think my story is probably a little bit different, potentially from other guests. I don't have this large, like, moment or external indicator of me being different. I think my differences have been something I've tried to avoid.
Hmm.
I think I spent a really big chunk of my life trying to just fit in and conform. And it wasn't until I got older and I looked back and saw that the path I took was very different than the path that other people in my family took. And maybe other people can relate to once I share a little bit more detail about that. So I grew up with some pretty extensive childhood trauma. And if people are familiar with childhood trauma, it usually does a lot to you kind of neurologically and psychologically. I'm the oldest of 5. And along the way, I lost a brother who completed suicide in 2005. 2 of my other siblings are active addicts. I have a sister who is homeless. We don't know where she is from day to day. And so without going into, I can go into more detail and stories as it unfolds, but I didn't realize I was different until someone told me I was.
Hmm.
Mm.
Where
It
were you
was,
at? What happened?
yeah, it was like a couple moments. And it was one time a therapist and another time a friend who I kind of lay out this chronological order of my traumas, starting at 5 when my dad was murdered, all the way up into, a few years ago. And, some things happened. And so they looked at me and said, how are you possibly like stable?
Right.
I think the intent behind the comment was, how are you normal? How is it
Yeah.
that you function day to day with all of these life experiences when your siblings didn't? I have one brother who is, really great, and his life struggles were very similar to mine, but he's happy and healthy and functioning and all of those things. So, but my other siblings, there's a deep sadness about where their life went and how they processed the trauma of our childhood.
Mhm.
So it was a
Mhm.
friend first that said, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that how are you so normal?" And then the shock on a therapist's face when if you've ever been in therapy, oftentimes they ask, like, okay, well, tell me what brings you here and
Right.
tell me a little bit about your childhood. And so I, list this long list of events and their jaw drops. And again, they say, oh my gosh, I can't believe that you've made it this far.
Right.
And so this, I think, misconception we often have about people that experience childhood trauma is that we're broken and that we're really predestined. We're destined to go down a path of addiction or domestic violence or end up in our juvenile justice system and then our prison systems and things like that. And certainly some of my siblings went down that path. But so I consider myself different in that way, in that trying to push back against that stereotype we have about people who experience childhood trauma, that we can survive, we can be resilient, and that I learned so much from those experiences. And I'm not afraid of them. Like I embrace them now at this point in my life.
That's really
Awesome.
powerful. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Lenora, do you have a question you wanted to throw
Oh,
out there?
go ahead. You go.
Well, I'm curious. You kind of mentioned, Sarah, that you didn't have maybe later on in life through these experiences with a friend and a therapist of sort of realizing, oh, maybe I am, or sort of being told you're different, or the word that comes to mind is it's almost exceptional. Like you have all these adverse childhood experiences, which would dictate that you have a higher likelihood of, as you said, addiction or heading down the juvenile justice pathway and heading to prison or all those issues. And that's not the direction you went. One of the things you'd also mentioned was even from a young age, you felt like you were intentionally trying to not be different, but to really blend in and just kind of go with the flow and what was around you. And I'm kind of, what my assumption behind that would be is, in a lot of the stories we hear or we've heard, someone was being othered and told they were different. And what it almost sounds like is you knew you were different because you looked around and went, I need to be more like that and I need to be more, I don't know. I'm just kind of curious. Like, was there something inside that you maybe felt without having to be told that this isn't normal?
Yeah, you definitely hit on a reflection I have often is that, and I didn't know at the time that exactly that somewhere in me, I knew I needed to be different than the environment I was in. Like,
so
surrounded. Yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry to interrupt. I think that's part of it because in my mind, I'm thinking, and I want to be mindful that I'm getting this right and honoring this story. You said you were 5 when your dad was murdered. And is that right? You said that so
nonchalant.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's kind of like, holy,
that's what most
expletive.
people do. Yeah.
And,
Right.
and I want to be mindful of that because but at the same time, when I'm 5 and I'm thinking about 5, whatever I experience at 5, it's just normal. Like that's just what 5-year-olds do. Like that's how you don't know you don't have the tools or the skills to process this as like, people, if I'm 5 and my dad gets murdered, that's what happens to most 5-year-olds. I guess that's part of the question behind it is, did it seem whatever was happening when you were a kid, was that normal? Or did you sense there's something off here? And this just isn't the way everybody else is experiencing life.
Yeah, it was both. I knew I was, looking back, right? When you're 5 also, you're just doing what you need to do. Like, it's not until later in life where you realize, but I was also, since I was the oldest, I didn't have a choice.
Right.
From just I have no idea how or why, but I knew that I needed to protect my siblings. And so that's just what I did. But I knew I was sad. I remember crying. I remember asking for my dad. I remember, my grandma talking about him, but I also knew that the environment I was in, wasn't okay, but that's all I had.
Right.
And I didn't have a way out. I didn't think I needed out because, like you said, I totally thought it was normal. It wasn't until I was older that, one of my like values or paths in life is that life is short. And that resonates as a 5-year-old learning that people died.
Yeah.
So life is short because that's just my belief. I learned that really early that, people just die and they're gone forever and you never see them again. And that was just reinforced by, my grandfather died and then my brother dying. And it, just really enforced this idea that life is short. So you make the most of it. But so it's kind of a long-winded way to answer your question of, that was just my life. And that's why I never considered myself different.
Yeah.
Because that's just what you do.
Just was. Yeah.
Yeah.
How old were you when you did kind of come to that realization of like that this was not normal?
Yeah. Sadly to say, it wasn't until my brother passed. So I was 30 when he passed. My youngest was 4 months old. Wow. Up until that point, I had really lived my life and built a life around being a good mom and stopping the generational trauma that existed in my family. That was the cross I was going to die on, and that was the hill I was going to die on. But it was really subconsciously. I didn't know that, that I was doing that until my brother died. And for me, that moment, it was like a bomb went off in my life. His passing just shattered every belief I had about kind of what our family was and my capacity to change that. It just really annihilated all the beliefs I had about, kind of what family is and my role in that, and that I could single-handedly fix our family. That if I did all the right things, I got married, I had 2 kids, I was PTA mom, I did all the, check, all the things that you do, or that we say you're supposed to do, that would finally fix our family. And so his death, it took a couple months for that to settle in, but that was the moment when I knew that, things were different and things were going to be radically different in my life.
Lenora, go ahead. So I just want to say thank you for this is not, it's a really vulnerable story again. And so I really appreciate all the honesty, and I've just got lots of questions because it's a powerful, powerful story.
Well, I was wondering, Sarah, I think I heard you say a little earlier about like some maybe decisions that you've made, like, before when you were maybe growing up, you were kind of thinking this way. And even then when your brother passed away, like everything, your whole world was rocked. And were there some like decisions that you made at that point that you're still doing now? Or I don't know, what changed at that point for you?
When my brother passed, or before that?
Exactly. Well, yeah, I think that's one pivotal moment, but whatever you want to share.
Yeah, I for sure walked a slippery slope like through high school in terms of, I think I for sure could have gone down a much different path. And I didn't have any adult supervision. I spent most of my childhood parenting my siblings, and then into adolescence and high school, no real supervision of any kind. So
What saved
I
you then? What was it that kind of helped you get through that without getting in too much trouble?
Yeah, I know. I owe so much to a couple of people. One is a teacher. So because my home life was so chaotic, school was my safe place. That was the place where I knew I would be safe. And so I spent as much time as I could at school. My freshman year in high school, I was on the cheerleading team. I used to be a cheerleader. And I was failing every single class. And the advisor kind of pulled me aside and said, "Hey, you're not going to be eligible. You're not going to be able to go to the game Friday because your grades." And I kind of was like, at that point, on this cusp of kind of like, oh, well, I don't care. Like, no one else cares. Why should I? And just thank goodness for them, because they rallied behind me and said, "We're going to help you and support you," and kind of took me in and gave me a safe place to be, and helped me create an identity around being a leader. I got into student government. I had a role. I had a job. People needed me.
Perfect.
I felt important. I had responsibilities, and so for sure, he was a pivotal person in my life. And then I was also very fortunate that my paternal grandmother, we stayed very close, and she really was my saving grace. I had an example of someone who was stable and kind and loving, and could teach me and model all those behaviors that I would need later in life.
Did your siblings have something similar, or maybe not? You know what I mean? Like, I just wonder about like just these different paths that you were on.
Yeah, I know. I wonder that same thing all the time. And I tried. I didn't realize I was doing this till I was older, but I thought I was that person to them. And so my brother dying was me blaming myself. It was me saying I didn't do enough. I wasn't there enough for him, and I should have done better. I should have done more. In reality, that's not true, right? Like, I know now that it wasn't my fault. But I do think that it just boggles my mind how these very small decisions about who we spend time with, who we allow into our lives, can just shape and alter the course of our life, especially when we're young. I think it's even more profound that way. And I think for them, that's kind of what happened is they kind of hung with a different crowd, and school wasn't really their thing. They were into skateboarding, and it's just such a slippery slope and so unintentional.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I don't
it's not
think
like they made up their mind one day, like, oh, this is what it's just kind of, they just kind of fell into it. And then there was no parenting to drag them out of like, no, you can't do that. We have rules here. There's this,
no real support in terms of a role model, a model of how do I get myself even out of this? I think addiction comes from deep, deep wounds that are unhealed, and healing those is equally as painful as the addiction.
Yeah. Sarah, you kind of mentioned, kind of to go down that path, you'd mentioned that you felt a sense of responsibility at first, and for your brother's suicide. And you'd also mentioned, this is something that's kind of been coming up in conversations that I've been having with a lot of people, and even within conversations within my family, this notion of what's the generational trauma that's occurring within my family, the cycles that I'm hoping to be this is the generation where that stops. And I'm kind of curious, as you reflect on your experience, what tools and resources are you thankful for, or do you wish you had maybe earlier on as you made that decision to say, hey, I see this and I want to end it?
Gosh, that's such a great question. and super easy for me to answer because I wish we talked about it more, that the person that decides to break that cycle, like, we need more support for that person.
Right.
There's still a lot of it is a mystery in terms of the skills I had, to cope and manage and navigate these challenging situations. But I wish someone would have told me that it was possible to change the cycle, to break the cycle. Like, I almost imagine like a support group or something,
Right.
like, where we can just lean on each other and say, yes, this is hard. Because essentially that person, and maybe Max, I don't know if you're experiencing this, is like you carry the weight of the family and your ancestors and the generations, in my family, mostly the women before me, who suffered at the hands of, a society that doesn't support women, and the children that they, had, and on and on. And so I really do see these women behind me, saying thank you, but also they're tired and they're hurt, and that hurt carries to the person that's trying, to change the story of the family. So I really wish that we had more conversation around and applaud people that make that decision, because it's hard. It is so hard, and it's lonely. It's very, very lonely.
Yeah, I think it's to get away from the question, a bit more of a conversation. That's kind of, I really appreciate that insight, because it's been actually kind of a conversation for my wife that she's having a lot, and so being with her and walking with her through a lot of it. It's also like, I think 10, 15, 20 years ago, the idea of going to therapy was like, either you're stigmatized because you're crazy, quote unquote, or you're from LA and it's the fancy thing to do. And I think a lot of people are realizing just how challenging all this is to walk alone, and how important it is to have somebody who can, to your point, be able to walk alongside you through this and help you process a lot of it. But then also the other thing that we had a great conversation last week with Sharif and Carmela, and it's this notion of community, which I think COVID screwed all that up for so many people, which also, for like, as example, for my wife, exposed a lot of the wounds and the challenges in the family. I mean, everybody's gone through a hell of a last few years. And it's also, I think, left a lot of people feeling isolated from any sense of community to walk through some of this stuff with people. And it takes a lot to be vulnerable and say, that's where I'm at. This is what I'm struggling through, because in a room of 10 people, you're not going to be the only person, but somebody has to be willing to step up and say, I need help walking through this too. And there's probably another 5, 6, 7, 8, everybody in that room who can say, I'm there with you.
Yeah.
So
and to let,
Oh, go ahead, Sarah. Sorry.
Well, just I don't share these stories publicly very often. I think the older I get, the more, I guess, empowered I feel to be able to share them. But I often don't share them because so many times it leads to this comparative trauma dialogue.
Yes.
Whoa, will that happen? Oh, well,
is that really trauma? Is that really trauma though?
Yeah, that, like somehow my trauma isn't as good as yours, or yours is so much bigger than mine. And yes, I do agree that, I had someone one time tell me in a class, Lenora, we were teaching, that they got a speeding ticket and they were traumatized. And it's like, we started throwing this word around.
You're using that word too much. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, let's time out. That it makes.
Let me tell you my story here real quick, ma'am.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So first of all, let's owning like what really, but there's a spectrum of trauma, and my trauma for someone may feel extreme, and to someone else, my trauma is going to feel like a walk in the park.
Right.
And we've all heard stories of childhood abuse and the horrific things that happen to kids. And I'm grateful that that's not my story. But I'm not going to compare.
No.
Like
No.
it's so that's the unfortunate part, I think, in terms of community, like letting go of, it's not a contest. There's no winning.
What would be a good response for you? Like if you were to share this story with other people.
Now that you have.
But you know what I mean? Like just in person or one-on-one or whatever. What would be a good response for you? Like what could someone say instead of saying, well, gosh, you should hear about how I grew up?
Yeah. My typical response is just to respond with empathy and compassion and say, gosh, that sounds really hard.
Yeah.
I just wish they wouldn't do it. I just wish we all would collectively agree to not compare our trauma to someone else's.
Yeah.
And that I get to own my story just like you do and Max does and everyone else. And so I need to think of a good response. Maybe it's that sounds really hard, and we all have been through hard things. I don't know. It's just so difficult to come up with the right response that resonates with someone.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, what I would say to you right now, and I think Max has already said, like, thank you for sharing, right? Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing. And there's, I don't know, it's all like, thank you. But, going down another pathway of like comparison or trying to one up people, it's like, oh my goodness, seriously, just.
Yeah.
Well,
maybe it is just modeling. Yeah. Sorry, Max. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I just love your comment, like, own your story.
Right.
And this is it's a kind of maybe a little glib, but kind of the mantra in our house right now is not my monkeys, not my circus. And like I don't have to own I don't have to compare, and your story is your story. And I think there's also something beautiful to be able, once you can accept that for yourself, you can also accept that for others. That like, yeah, it may not look as, it's not going to make headline news. It may not be the story that, everybody is making a feature film about. It doesn't mean it's still not, it's still somebody's story, and that person is still of value and worth, and to be heard and to be cared for and respected. And we can hear those stories and care for those people regardless of what it is. And there's no need to compare that. Like it's not, trauma is not a competition.
No.
We don't lose anything by not comparing. We don't. Yeah.
Sarah, what would you say to 5-year-old Sarah? If you could go back, if there's something that you'd want to say or do for her, what would that look like?
Oh gosh, 5-year-old Sarah walks with me still every day. She's still, a big part of my life, and I try to honor her all the time. And so in the playfulness, in, trying to remember to be playful, those childhood things that I wish had not been tainted with, the trauma of my experiences. So I think for sure, I think what you really want is to go back and heal and protect that, that child. But short of that, telling her that everything would be okay. And that you have power here, and that you have choice. I think those are powerful things for a kid to know, even in the midst when they feel like they don't have a lot of power or control. And to trust in love. It sounds really cheesy and corny, but that mantra has gotten me pretty far and brings me a lot of peace in my heart. That just lean into love where you can find it and where you can get it. And so I hope that she would hang on to that message of just hang on to love, find love where you can.
mic drop right there. So
Yeah,
No.
really special. Thank you so much for sharing your heart and your story and your vulnerability. And we're grateful for you and for your story, because it's yours.
Yeah.
yes.
And
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I mean, I can't imagine two other people to to be with. I don't share this story all the time, so I appreciate both of you, and I just appreciate what you're building here. It's so powerful for people. It's powerful for me to be able to share my story. Each time I share it brings me a little bit more comfort and a little bit more peace about it, and it builds community. Like Max said, I love that word. Just we need more community, especially nowadays. Yes.
So thank you again. So good
Yeah.
to see you. Just like all the hearts.
Yeah. I don't know how to.
I know.
I need to practice that. Oh, thank you both so much. It was really nice chatting with you and letting me share.
Thank you, sir. Thank
Take
you.
care.
Mhm. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Yo.
What a wonderful story from Sarah. I'm in awe, I think, of my friends, really.
Yeah.
And
Just keep them coming.
I know, and they will keep coming, and it's just there's something healing about this. So I just really appreciate Sarah being so vulnerable and sharing a very difficult story to hear, and even more to go through. But
yeah, no, I think it's amazing how I guess I put it this way, Lenora. I knew that we'd get some cool stories in having this is your brainchild. This is your premise. This is your concept of I just want to hear when people felt different. And so that I guess I was not I knew we'd get cool stories. I didn't think it would take us like 2 episodes and then whatever we're in 6 or 7 to get some really people being willing to be extremely vulnerable about their stories and to share in this with us. And I think what's made me think about even just in quickly reflecting from Sarah's story is, as she said, it's helpful to talk through this story for her to have a space to share, and also the need for community and being able to be open and honest of, hey, I've got stuff I'm working through, and this isn't easy, and it needs to be done together. We're kind of creating this little community of people who can share their stories and be open and honest and vulnerable, and just applaud you for creating this space and allowing people to do that.
of course, thanks for joining me, Max.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I feel honored to just be. Like every week we do this. I just feel honored that you'd let me sit in on these conversations and meet so many more of your friends.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing I didn't share earlier too about Sarah is Sarah and I during COVID we had our own show. We did it for about 6 months. Every Friday we went live, and we just brought in only women. When did you find like that moment in time where you're like, oh, I'm doing really well. Like this is I hit this like groove where I know where I am. You know what I mean? That confidence and that security and all those things. So it's just fun to see Sarah again and hear her story. So
yeah, absolutely. One of those podcasts where I would probably stay on for another hour just to unpack it. So I think it'd probably be good to call it a night. And I think also just a quick reminder for folks, if you're hearing these and you're like, gosh, I'm on the fence about sharing, I think it might be helpful. Maybe like I would take a little bit of a kick in the butt from Sarah, which is this is helpful. It's helpful to share your story and talk about it. I'm on the fence myself when it's like, we're going to get you on the hot seat one of these days. And I'm finally coming around to the idea of fine. And honestly, I think Sarah's story has helped me to process how to share. In all honesty. So
that's good.
We'll look forward to that. And we're lined up with someone for next week, right?
Yeah, we've got people coming. I think we're booked for the rest of the month. So this is super exciting.
Awesome.
We're going into February now. So this is great. Keep it coming, everybody. So good to have you all join us, and love hearing from you all on social media.
Tell your friends and family.
Yeah. All right. Well, take care, everybody. We'll see you next week.
See you.
Bye.
The Let's Chat About It video podcast, produced and edited by Lenora Sneva, invites listeners to share their stories. To participate, email letschatnow1010@gmail. New episodes featuring people like you and me are released every Friday. Thank you for listening and being a part of a community who cares. Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify. Thanks for listening!